Oregon's big recruiting momentum gets slowed a little bit, and I'm just here thinking about the hangover.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why if you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get yourself started. Plenty of recruiting talk. What kind of message Oregon's sending to the Big Ten right now? Can Oregon handle the Big Ten? All coming up on today's show. But five-star tight end Linkon has committed to Kansas State, which puts all eyes in the recruiting realm right now on Kaleb Edwards, who commits later today, July 2nd, 2024. So that's kind of the last-ditch effort. When you look at the offer list Oregon has made for tight ends in the class of 2025, if they're going to have multiple tight ends, seems like Edwards is the last option. Alabama has got the crystal balls, according to 24/7 Sports. Ohio State had all the crystal balls for Dorian Brew, and Oregon landed him. Texas was apparently the leader for Josiah Sharma, and he has also chosen the Ducks. That was one of the commits that took place over the weekend. So that's where Oregon's recruiting efforts are. And the reason I say I'm thinking about the hangover here is I saw that Linkon committed to Kansas State. In-state kid, Oregon got Deshaun Brame, and he's a really talented guy. Would have been great to get to. Another tight end can certainly be used. But with how great of a weekend Oregon had, I was thinking of that scene in The Hangover where Bradley Cooper's character is Phil is saying bleep, and then Zach Galifianakis, Alan, says, "Gosh darn it, bleep, shoot." I felt like Alan, definitely not Phil. I would never say such things, certainly not on the show. But that's why I was thinking about the hangover there, because look. It is absolutely disappointing at some level to not get Linkon, really talented guy. I think that tight end position is one of need. It's why I was happy to see them land Brame. It's why I'm curious to see what happens with Kaleb Edwards for this 2025 class, and whether Oregon does then ratchet up the efforts to try to flip a tight end currently committed elsewhere. And certainly got to keep the foot on the gas pedal to keep Deshaun Brame committed to Oregon. I haven't heard anything right now that anyone else would try and come flip him, but the class of 2025 has to have at least one tight end, probably two in it, or else you introduce a transfer portal discussion, which can certainly be feasible. We've seen Oregon have a lot of success in the transfer portal over the last couple of seasons. So it's not as if there would be a gaping roster hole without another tight end in 2025. It would just be a nice addition. Still, does it stunt Oregon's growth in the class momentarily? Yes. Do I fully expect it to pick back up? Also, yes, because that's just where Oregon is at on the recruiting trail. They are a hot commodity for recruits, and that's a great thing. And certainly not getting Linkon, for some places, not getting a five-star. Like if Kansas State had not gotten Linkon, that would have been, wow, put a lot of time, effort, energy, and resources in. That was going to be one of our most talented guys. Yeah, Linkon would have been one of Oregon's most talented guys. They now move on to the next incredibly talented blue chip prospect, because that's where they're recruiting right now. So did I want Linkon? Yes, absolutely. No doubt about it. Bummed to not get him? Sure. Wildly concerned? Absolutely not. So that's how I reacted to that. But in other recruiting news, Oregon did not get Noah McHale, who committed to Texas A&M. Oregon did not get Gavin Nix. Those are a couple of linebackers. Nix committed to Miami. And DJ Pickett is another name to note, five-star defensive back. Steve Wiltfong of On3 reported that, and On3's got DJ Pickett as their number one overall DB, or the number one overall DB available at the very least in the class of 2025. He's a 5-star guy across the board. That is definitely a consensus with him. Miami's going after him hard, but Oregon is continuing to push to try and land him, and that's not going to be an easy thing to do because he's a Florida kid, and Miami is right in his backyard, and Oregon is a long, long ways away from home. I also got a question about Jonah Williams, who is another 5-star safety linebacker type. Sometimes those positions can be interchangeable. A guy can come in as a safety and leave as a linebacker. Think Jeffrey Bossa and Jamal Hill, for instance, or Bryce Betcher was a safety and then I think got moved down to linebacker, or at least he was playing safety in that spring game, and then he played linebacker when he was actually on the field. That Major League Baseball draft is in a couple of weeks. We'll see if Betcher ends up getting drafted there, because that'll impact the depth for Oregon's linebacker room for this upcoming season, if he is, of course, done playing football. But we'll just have to wait and see on that front. I digress. The linebacker position, another one that, as you look at Oregon's receiver class, or Oregon's recruiting class, rather, in the 2025 cycle, it is one that you expect there to be some growth. Nasir Wyatt, if you were to just go on there, is listed as a tight end. I see him more of an edge prospect. That's what he plays in high school. He's got nasty film, ridiculous speed coming off the edge. So Oregon doesn't really have a true linebacker committed in this class. I'd expect that to change. Now, whether they see Williams as a linebacker or safety, I don't know. But between DJ Pickett, Jonah Williams, and Naeem Offord, who's the current Ohio State 5-star defensive back commit, I feel solid. I won't say great, but I feel solid that Oregon is going to land at least one of them. And Linkon Cure, that's a 5-star guy they missed. Yeah, it turns out you can't get them all because other teams and schools have good coaches and good recruiting pitches and great facilities and a nice campus and winning tradition and all that sort of stuff. So, it's an impressive poll for Kansas State, to be sure. Linkon Cure was from the state of Kansas. That's why the Wildcats were in on him. I don't know that there are other 5-star commits that Kansas State is regularly after. It's certainly an outlier in that sense. But, getting Brame was notable. I think Oregon definitely stayed in the mix for Cure, but Kansas State just ended up being able to make that hometown pitch. But Kaleb Edwards, definitely a guy that I'm eyeballing for Tuesday to see where he commits. He's scheduled to commit on July 2nd. So hopefully he chooses Oregon, and I think that would solidify the tight end position for 2025. Transfers are always an option. Tight end's not a position, though, where you really see a ton of high-end talent moving around. Benjamin Urosic from Stanford to Georgia, that's probably the most high-profile tight end move I can think of. I'm trying to rack my brain and come up with another one. Carson Ryan went from UCLA to Utah, but again, he's just like a solid player. He's not going to be the number one guy. Tight end, yeah, you just don't see it very often. I don't know what it is. Tight ends are loyal homebodies to their schools, I suppose. So that's the latest for Oregon. But I think as they go into the Big Ten, they're doing something really, really annoying to other teams, and it's got to be starting to reverberate at some point. Have we talked about FanDuel yet? We did earlier. We're going to do it again. I love sports, and I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. Quite literally, 24/7, 365. This summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone. Every day, all summer long. You can bet stuff for Oregon as well. You can bet them against Ohio State. You can bet their win total of 10.5, tied for the highest in all of college football. National title odds, Big Ten title odds. It is all there. Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Not even kidding when I say one of my favorite parts about being in Oregon for the summer is drinking Oregon water. If you feel me on that, drop me a comment or shoot me a direct message. So, let's continue along, shall we? Oregon's going into the Big Ten, and Dan Lanning is making some waves. I have a sense, just kind of a growing gut feeling, not just from, reading pieces on the interwebs and commentary about Lanning and the way he's recruiting, but I just think about what it would be like if there was a team new to our league and our conference was still around, RIP Pac-12, and that school came in and started beating out the school that I'm rooting for a bunch of big-time recruits. That would kind of rub me the wrong way. It would irk me at the very least a little bit. So if you're Ohio State and Michigan who are going after a guy like Jordan Davison, or if you're also Ohio State and you were going after Dorian Brew and you thought you had him and then it kind of flipped. At some point, it just has to be a little jab, just a little poke. Like at the end of Iron Man 2, when the senator, spoiler alert, who is actually an agent of Hydra, is putting the pin on Rhodey and Tony for their work in the battle to defeat Whiplash. And he puts the pin on Tony Stark, who he doesn't like because Tony Stark, embarrassed him in public. And he pokes his body. Ow! Oh, sorry. Funny how annoying a little prick can be. That kind of feels like Oregon right now. It's like, man, these guys used to be we didn't have to compete for those guys as hard. And now we got to go against Oregon all the time. So Dan Lanning is making, I think, a pretty sizable statement on the recruiting trail. Not just that they're here now in 2024, because everybody seems to understand that pretty universally. But the other component to this is a very clear message of we're not going anywhere. This is a Tier 1 Big Ten program in 2024 and every year for the foreseeable future. Josh Pate, I had multiple people send me the clip, which I heard because I listened to Josh's show. I think he does a fantastic job, and he's a great listen to get you ready for the college football season. So is this guy who hosts Locked On College Football. Just check him out. So I was listening, and he was talking about Dan Lanning. And a point he made incredibly well was that Lanning has been a head coach for 2 seasons. Two seasons, not 3 seasons. He's going into his 3rd year. He's been head coach for 2 seasons. He's 22-5. I don't remember if Josh mentioned this, but he has not lost to an unranked team. Lost to highly ranked Georgia. Lost to Washington 3 times. They're ranked every single time. Lost to Oregon State. And Oregon State was ranked in that game as well. So what Pate correctly pointed out was that we have not yet seen the best of Dan Lanning as a coach. We've seen a lot of encouraging signs, but this isn't a guy like Mario Cristobal, for instance, who had been a head coach previously. He'd been a coordinator before. It is a whole new world, and yes, I'm referencing the Aladdin song right there. It is a whole new world when you are the head guy, and you get to determine, do we go for it? Do we kick? Do we call this fake punt? Do we do this onside kick? Do we do that? Those are just the small responsibilities that are, of course, very important on game days that we see and know about, but it's a whole other undertaking, especially in today's world behind the scenes. And Josh's point is that, Pate's point, we're not on a first name basis, not yet, maybe one day. Pate's point is that Lanning is going to continue to improve because coaches traditionally over time, the longer they stay at a place and as their careers get longer, they get a lot better. And the pushback against Dan Lanning is, I even see this every now and then in the comment section from Oregon fans. Well, he needs to win a big game. He hasn't won a big game. I mean, first of all, patently false that he has not won a big game. And secondly, he's in his 2nd year. What is the standard? What is the timeline for a coach to win a conference championship per se that leads you to believe, yeah, this guy can be a good head coach? Because Nick Saban in his first year at Alabama lost to Louisiana Monroe. Not Louisiana, the Ragin' Cajuns, who, have had a respectable, I think, Sun Belt football program for quite a while. No. Like the place where Billy Napier was before he got to Florida, and Billy Napier is going to be fired after, not this season, next season, just in case you were curious. Maybe you weren't, now you know. Anyway, he lost to Louisiana Monroe at Alabama in year 1. Can you imagine the message board crowd today if a coach at an institution like that lost to Louisiana. This is unacceptable. You can't judge a book by its cover or a coach by his first and second years. Sometimes coaches pop, because one comparison that Lanning is always going to draw, any Oregon coach is going to draw, is Chip Kelly. Because Chip came in and started guns wait a minute. Yeah, I know that Oregon won the Pac-10 in his first season. That's great. What was Chip's first game again? Dave Chappelle, let me put my thinking cap on. I gotta think. Oh, yeah, that's right. They scored one touchdown, and then LeGarrette Blount punched a guy. That's how his coaching career began. Do you think there were any overreacting Oregon fans at the time that said, oh my gosh, he's lost control, he doesn't know, things are spiraling? I think it worked out. I think it worked out pretty darn well. And so the point that I'm making here is Lanning got better from year 1 to year 2. Do you think he can get better year 2 to year 3? I know that he can. Oregon lost 1 regular season game last year. They could lose 0 this year. So just record-wise, you could have improvement. But as a head coach, he went toe-to-toe with one of the best in college football and has one of the best coaching win percentages in recent memory. And he wasn't able to beat that guy. Well, maybe one day he'd be able to. Because Kirby Smart didn't beat Nick Saban in his first go-round either. Kirby Smart, when do you think Kirby Smart became the head coach of the Georgia Bulldogs? That's the best coach in college football. Think about that. Anybody could say, not necessarily would, but anybody could reasonably argue, and I would, that Kirby Smart is the best coach in all of college football. The very best one. He's got the best program. He recruits at the highest level. He's won 2 national championships. He wins the most games and everything. What year do you think Kirby Smart took over? Yeah, he became the head coach in Athens in 2016. 2016. He didn't win a national championship till 2021. He didn't reach a national championship game till his 3rd season. Beg your pardon. He reached it in his 2nd season, and then he didn't reach it for any of the next 3 years. 3 consecutive years. We're talking about 5 seasons came and went, and Georgia didn't win a national championship, and now he's the best coach in college football. Jim Harbaugh got to Michigan sometime in the middle 2010s or so. This stuff can take some time to fester, to brew. You got to have a recruiting identity. You got to have a coaching identity. There are all sorts of elements to how you identify with players that are recruits and players who are on your team. Jim Harbaugh got to Michigan in 2015. He didn't win the national championship till this past season. Is he any good? I don't know when Dan Lanning wins a national championship at Oregon. I can't even guarantee to you that he does. The point that was correctly made on Pate's show is that we haven't seen the best of Dan Lanning. This is not the ceiling. This is not the best he has to offer. This is the best that he's done so far. But guys tend to get better and better and better. I think about many things in terms of golf analogies. Guys who come on the PGA Tour and can win PGA Tour events oftentimes don't win a major or even contend in a major for many years. Max Homa is a great example. Max Homa got on the PGA Tour quite a while ago, lost his tour status, had to go fight and win it back on the Korn Ferry Tour, and then got up, and he's won on the PGA Tour several times. He's contended in a major one time. That's not going to be the case for his career. He will contend in other majors, but it takes a second. You got to let these things brew. So the best of Dan Lanning is still to come. And as Oregon goes into the Big Ten, I have no expectation that he will do anything except keep them as a Tier 1 program. You had 18 teams. I think you can readily and easily put 6 teams into each of those and say, yeah, you got your conference title contenders, you got teams knocking on the door that can do it every now and then, and you got bottom dwellers. And I expect Oregon to be a Tier 1 team and a Tier 1 program year in and year out, so long as Dan Lanning is at the helm. Love that clip. Thanks for sending it in. We got a mailbag question to get to. Speaking of the Big Ten, can Oregon hang with that style? Can they match the physicality? I got pop cultural references coming out my ears, and I'll give you another one right after this. I said the word physicality, and I thought of Game of Zones. Verticality. I think that was a Roy Hibbert joke. Pretty good one. Roy Hibbert, good appearance on Parks and Rec back in the day. If you want to get in the mailbag, you of course can. YouTube comments or X, formerly known as Twitter. If you want priority access, all sorts of other perks, go join the flock over at Subtext. That link is in the description below, wherever you listen to or watch this show. Free 14-day trial. Then it's just $5 a month, but you get all sorts of perks and insights that everybody else does not get. This question came in from the Drastic MC. Whatever floats your boat. The defense will be better statistically over the offense due to being in the Big Ten, while in the Pac, I would always point to our national defensive rankings due to the offenses we faced. You're going to give up yards against offensive teams. Same concept, but the opposite in the Big Ten. I don't disagree with that. That being said, I think we need to hold our horses here. The Big Ten is way more physical. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Y's on the word way. So 6 times more physical? Is that what that means? Maybe. It's going to be a different kind of grind. We got to see if we can handle that. Out of all the newcomers, I think we're the best equipped. I fully agree with that. Remains to be seen. Don't think the national championship just yet. Outside of that, Georgia and Alabama still loom. Your thoughts on my rant. So, as Oregon goes into the Big Ten, I think this is a perfectly fair question to ask. You play teams in colder weather games later in the season. You play teams that are more accustomed to playing physical, smash-mouth football. When you look at Oregon's roster, the way they have recruited, and the way they played a season ago, what concerns should we have about the physicality? I didn't see any a year ago. Because if you're saying, well, does Oregon have the horses to go? Back in the Chip Kelly, Mark Helfrich days, particularly in the Chip era, because Helfrich went a little bit more to a power spread, whereas Chip was a speed spread, you could ask that question pretty fairly and say, hey, are there undersized and speedy linemen who can pull out and get on the edge? Are they going to hold up against the big boys in the Big Ten or the SEC? And oftentimes, they didn't. Auburn, LSU, defensive line, shut down the run game, took out the Oregon offense. And that was a legitimate talking point going in, and that result played itself out. Oregon doesn't recruit that way anymore. What would their recruiting have to look like to ease the concerns that fans may have about the physical nature of the Big Ten? I don't really know, because Oregon's currently working. Their 2025 class has fallen back just a hair to 6th nationally. They're going to get more commits, and I expect them to push for a top 5 class as they had a season ago. So their high school recruiting class rankings are 9th, 3rd, or was it 4th? 9th or 3rd or 4th? I got to double check that real quick. Got to be accurate because people will be on top of you, especially in the YouTube comments. 3rd in the high school composite ranking. 9th, 3rd, and likely in the top 10. What exactly there are plenty of linemen on both sides of the ball there. I mean, Oregon literally has a transfer along the defensive line, one of whom is they have multiple transfers. Last year, Jordan Birch came over from the SEC. Well, I guess you can't have that narrative concern of, the Pac-12 isn't as physical. I'm not trying to take a shot at you here, just the people that, would paint this in a more negative light, which I don't think you were. Derek Harmon was literally playing in the Big Ten last year and is a good football player. Last several years, good football player. Jamar Caldwell, all-conference guy in the Big 12, had several other big-name schools going after him when he transferred from Houston. And then that edge position is just loaded with blue-chip prospects, the likes of which you'd say, well, Oregon's got to have blue-chip guys. I heard Bud Elliott on the Odds and Audibles podcast recently talking about how Oregon has a 76% blue-chip ratio, meaning 76% of their roster are former 4- or 5-star recruits, and you have to have at least a 50% or 52% in order to be a national title contender. So yeah, I think Oregon is absolutely in that mix. I think if you compared this roster to the 2022 roster, they got blasted by Georgia, who was better then than they are right now, though they are very, very good at the moment. I think 2024 Oregon is probably a 7.5-point favorite over 2022 Oregon, and I think they win by probably 10 to 14 points. I think they're better. I think they're substantially better. I think they have the horses in the trenches. But when you think back to last season for Oregon, there was only one team they couldn't get through, but who out-physicaled Oregon? Oregon played a team that was known for physicality. They're called Utah. We've seen what Utah can do, and Oregon dog-walked them in their own stadium. Ran the ball, protected Bo Nix. I don't worry about Oregon's physicality going into the Big Ten. I really don't, because I have no reason to think that's going to be an issue, because nobody in the Pac-12, yeah, it can be more of a challenge, but if you're a team that's capable of playing with the most physical teams in the Big Ten and adapting to that style of football, how would it look when you went against a less physical conference? Exactly like Oregon did the last couple of years, where they were a really good running team and Bo Nix was sacked like twice over the course of 2 years. It was more than that, but I'm pretty sure the combined number was no more than like 10, which is insane. That is an insane number. So I think they are perfectly well positioned to go play that style of football and do so successfully. Does it mean they're going to score as many points as last year? No, I've said before, and I continue to believe they're not going to score as many points per game as they did a year ago. They were 44.5 a game and 530 yards per. Those numbers probably come down because you're going against better defenses. But just because you're playing against a different style and a better defense on average than what you went against last year does not mean it's going to be a struggle. It just means you won't be what you were a season ago, which statistically was one of the best offenses Oregon has ever had. And the team that beat them last year had the Joe Moore Award-winning offensive line. Okay. How many of those are in the Big Ten? Ohio State, I guess, could have one. I don't know if their offensive line has that much hype. But was it a physicality thing that caused Washington to beat Oregon, or was it Michael Penix and those receivers were just really, really hard to stop? Like, no, Oregon did not get enough pressure on Penix. I think that was more about scheme than personnel. Washington went max protection, and Oregon's blitzes just didn't get home. It was a really good adjustment from Ryan Grubb. That's why I'm happy he's my Seahawks' offensive coordinator now. But I think that for Oregon, they're going to be just fine. I don't worry about the offensive line getting mauled, not being able to run the football. They might not run it as successfully as the Pac-12. I don't think they're going to get stifled. I don't worry about them protecting Dylan Gabriel. I don't worry about the ability to pressure the quarterback. The numbers might come down because you have better play in the trenches traditionally in the Big Ten. I don't think they're going to come down to the point where it's an element of concern. And it's why I see Oregon as a national title contender. A lot of national pundits and the betting markets do as well, I think, for very good reason. Love the question. Keep them coming as always. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.